Okay, Jake, the news is now official. Joe Dumars is officially now with the Pelicans organization. Before we kind of talk about the benefits and kind of the stuff that he could provide, let's talk about this. And I know you've been very vocal about the process that the Pelicans went through to hire Joe Dumars, and you've been very outspoken in terms of this entire process. I'm sure you still feel this way in terms of how this all unfolded, correct?
Yeah, I think when you look at this was a flawed process for the Pelicans in hiring Joe Dumars. And this has less to do about Joe Dumars himself and his qualifications for the job, other than this is just a big inflection point for this franchise. You just let David Griffin go after 6 years. You need to chart the course for the next 5 to 10 years for the Pelicans. You need to make a very big decision about Zion Williamson. And if you're going to do that, you want the best person for the job. And you know what? Maybe that is Joe Dumars. It easily could be, but it doesn't sound like they interviewed anybody else or even considered anybody else for this role. It frankly sounds like this has been done for a couple of weeks now. You don't fire someone on Monday, then hire someone less than 48 hours later if you're casting a wide net. Maybe Joe Dumars is the right person for the role, but you want him to beat out other candidates for that. They didn't hire a search company or consultant company to try and get the best people for this. This just really feels like they hired someone that they have some familiarity with because he's from the state, because he's friends with people, with ownership and high up in the Pelicans and Saints. And that's kind of the direction that they did. Now, he does have qualifications. Joe Dumars won an NBA title as an NBA, as the lead executive with the Detroit Pistons, but you still got to get the right person for the job. And without interviewing a number of people, you can't be certain that you did.
Yeah, I do agree with that. He could end up being the right candidate if you went through the entire process of vetting other candidates, checking other organizations. Maybe there is a guy that is better. But if he beats all those guys out, fine. That's great. Yes, and no, I do agree with that. In terms of if he is the best qualified, then hire him. So now that he is here, the process is over, he is here. What can he, provide for this organization at this point right now? Where they're at, what can he do to lift this organization to another level? What can he bring?
Yeah, I think one of the big reasons they hired him is this is someone who carries a lot of respect around the league, a lot of connections around the league. And I don't think there's anyone in any sort of level of basketball that doesn't have tons of respect for Joe Dumars. And so he can step in with an air of authority right off of the bat. And the first decision that he's going to have to make is on Zion Williamson. And having that degree of authority, having been a championship player, a championship executive, it's going to let him be able to sit down with Zion Williamson and have some difficult conversations about Zion's lack of professionalism, the injuries that have caused him to miss so many games over the past couple of years. And maybe Joe Dumars is able to get through to Zion Williamson in a way that David Griffin wasn't. For all the faults that David Griffin had, maybe the biggest mistake that he made in his tenure was just not getting off to a good start with Zion Williamson. They had a frosty and rocky relationship for the first couple of years here, and that since got better over time. But could that have led to Zion Williamson putting more structure around himself, more professional habits and things like that? And I think this organization is hoping that Joe Dumars is going to kind of bring that approach to Zion Williamson, and then Zion Williamson is going to listen to him. And if he doesn't, they're going to be looking at trading him here. But Joe Dumars also said in the introductory PR email that they had sent out, this is someone who wants to have, a level of discipline with the team that we haven't seen, a level of toughness that we haven't seen with this team before, kind of building this team up maybe a little bit in the image of the bad boy Pistons era that Dumars was part of, that kind of blue collar ethic he had when building the team when he was the lead executives. They didn't have an all-star on that championship winning 04 team, which tells you about the work ethic of that group and the type of traits that he values in players and team building. And I think that's what they're hoping that he's going to bring, along with those connections and respect around the league.
Jake, with this hire with Joe Dumars, what does that mean for Willie Green? Does it signal that maybe he's safe in terms of returning as the head coach?
Yeah, I think you're going to see Willie Green as the head coach of the Pelicans next season. He's got one more year on his deal, from what I understand. He's someone that is well-liked by ownership, well-liked by everyone, truly. And I don't know if we've actually really been able to see him reach his full potential as a head coach. Look, you've had Zion Williamson available for around 40% of the games in his tenure. No one's going to really be able to have tons of success if that's the case. And so I think they're looking at this, assuming they keep Zion Williamson, of giving Willie Green kind of like, almost an audition to kind of keep his job, I think, in a sense of, let's see what you can do with a fully healthy roster and just a new direction of this franchise. That said, look, we've seen a lack of growth from Willie Green too. There's been a lot of positives. The team fights hard for him overall, but you've seen him kind of follow on, not develop players as much as you'd like. Look at how someone like Dyson Daniels has blossomed after this trade, where he's in an organization and has a coach that trusts him. And he's even been vocal about that in media availability since the trade here. That's a big knock on Willie Green, is they've also got to develop a pipeline of talent for the future here. But it definitely sounds like with this Joe Dumars hire, Willie Green is safe for next season.